Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's dustinkreis, and today we are going to do a game discussion over this game right here, Tales of Xillia 2, on the PS3. Finally, an RPG sequel that I feel is done right. A lot of times with these RPG direct sequels, they feel just like a new game in the same world, and they don't really feel like a continuation of the first game. Like Final Fantasy X-2 or Final Fantasy XIII-2. There hasn't really been a lot of direct sequels in the RPG world because, the stakes are just so high in these games that to create an even bigger stake in the second game is kind of a daunting task. But what I feel like Xillia 2 does correctly is it gets the old band back together and it further develops them in ways that other direct RPG sequels haven't. A lot of times the characters are relegated to the sidelines, and you don't really see a lot of development. It's just like, oh, this is what I'm doing now. That's the end. What Xillia 2 does, and does extremely well, is take these great characters from the first game and shows you where they're at a year later, and then continuously develops them further. And it's one of those great things that I wish more JRPGs would do, because a lot of the times you really feel really connected to these characters because you spend upwards of 40 hours with them, and to just sort of do what the Final Fantasy direct sequels do, which is just kind of like, hey, here I am, this is what I'm doing, okay, bye, I'll never impact the game from this point forward, really seems like a disservice, especially after playing this game. It seems like a disservice to those hours you spent with those characters. Xillia 2, like I said, it picks up a year later after the first game, and you're introduced to a new character named Luger Kresnik. And if you're a fan of the first game, you know Kresnik is kind of an ominous name in this this world. And through his sort of misadventures, he acquires a huge medical bill and has to work for the Spurious Corporation to pay it off. While doing this, he meets this little girl, Elle, who sets him on quite an adventure and allows him to meet up with all of the heroes of Tales of Xillia 1 and really not only create a great game story in and of itself, but really sort of enrich and not ruin what came before. God, my nose will not stop itching every time these things happen. But anyway, it's really amazing because you come into these games with some trepidation and pause. All right, you really come into these games with some trepidation, and to see the story handled as well as it is, because it is its own thing. It's not like a direct continuation of what happened in the first game, even though they reference back to the first game all the time. It is its own story and its own beginning, middle, and end. But it's great just to see how these characters and the world has evolved from the first game. And if they were ever to do an Xillia 3, which I really don't know if they would ever do, the end of the game kind of leaves it open maybe a little bit for Xillia 3. I would definitely be on board for that, because I think these characters have a little bit more to go. So let's go ahead and get into it. And the main thrust of the storyline, I think I spent like 45 hours on this game, and the main thrust of the storyline can probably be completed in about half of that. A lot of this game gets its extension from side quests. And that's always kind of a big problem with not only RPGs in general, but definitely sequels to RPGs. Final Fantasy XIII-2 was a huge side quest fest, and this is too. You can easily push this a lot further if you wanted to, trying to pay down that debt, doing all the side quests and all the little missions and stuff. But some of the missions, the jobs you can take to pay down the debt, are very helpful in the items you get and things like that. But what you really want to pay attention to in this is the character bonus missions, which every now and then when you're on the world map, you'll see like these red exclamation points next to towns. And what you do is you go into the town, you find the character, you talk to them, and then you do these like bonus stories with them. And they really add a lot to the game in that you still see like, you can see like what Jude is doing now and the things he's doing, what Mila's doing now. And the great thing about that, the more you do these, you get little bonus scenes in the main storyline, where if you hadn't done these, the storyline will be very short and truncated. But if you do these bonus things, you know, a little bonus scene in the overall scene where, like, say Jude will, you know, talk to Luger about something very personal. It adds a lot of characterization to the game, and, you know, it really is nice to catch up with these people and see what they're doing. But like I said, this is a side quest heaven type of thing, and I know some people have talked to me about not liking the fact that you have to pay down the debt. Personally, for a while, I was really enjoying it, and then, like most games where it has a bunch of side quest stuff in it, I really started to feel very burned out with the side questing, and I eventually stopped doing the bonus jobs and just focused on doing the character missions, and then if I had to do some jobs to pay down the debt, because the game kind of stops you from going where you want to go by putting travel limitations on you, and you cannot get these limitations lifted unless you pay down a certain amount of the debt. So it does kind of force you to play it its way, but you know, if you're a big Tales fan, you're not going to have a problem with this. It's a minor inconvenience, and it's so easy to make money in this game that paying down the debt enough to get to where you need to go is really not a problem at all. The only thing that kind of bugs me about it is if you don't pay it for a certain amount of time and you let your gold build up, Nova will call you and she'll make you pay it down. You can pay it down anytime you want by hitting the L2 button, but if you let it go for a while, she will call you and remind you to pay it. And a lot of times, you know, like, I would have a lot of gold built up, so I'd make a very substantial payment, and then I'd be like, okay, now I can go explore a little bit before she has to call me again later on. And then literally like 2 steps later, she'll call me again wanting more gold. So I'm not sure, like, how much you're supposed to pay down every time. It gives you a minimum payment, but I was making like way over the minimum payments, and she was still calling me like every 3 steps. So if she does that, where she's just continuously calling you, just pay down that entire level, and then she should leave you alone, because it's usually the story trying to push you, the game trying to push you in the story mode. But if you've played any Tales of Xillia game, you know what to expect from the battle system. There's really nothing new in this game except for the Chromatus transformation, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that's really what I like about this game. It's not like 13.2 or Lightning Returns that, you know, each game completely reinvents the wheel. It's the same battle system. It's Xillia 2. I mean, it's a sequel to the first game. Whereas I feel like the Square Enix Direct sequels, every game they feel like they have to reinvent the wheel, and it's something lesser than what came before. The only exception I could say is 13.2, but even then I didn't like the monster, like the Pokemon collecting monster thing. I would just rather have a third party member. But, you know, I haven't played Lightning Returns, but everyone just says it's not that great. So, you know, I give them credit for, you know, trying something new, but at the same time, it usually doesn't work. Whereas Xillia 2, if you loved Xillia 1, you're going to love everything about this game. The battle system is pretty much the same, except for the Chromatus transformations, which Luger has the ability, you can kind of see on the cover here, he's kind of transforming a little bit. Luger has the ability to transform into this more powerful version of himself. And your meter just builds up over time. So every battle you're in, you'll get a little bit of time back. And you can charge it up to, I think, 4 levels by the end of the game. 3 levels I know for sure, and then the storyline kind of gives you a 4th level. And basically you just hit both sticks at the same time, L3 and R3, and he'll transform into this, and you have a limited amount of time to deal as much damage with this form as you can. And it has its own spirit arts and things like that you can do. The downside is you can't take any damage in this form, but the downside is every time you get hit, it actually takes time away from you. So to get through these battles, especially a lot of the boss battles, which weren't really that hard, there's a couple that really got me, but for the most part, with a mixture of mystic arts and this chromatis, you'll have no problem getting through the boss battles. As far as the graphics go, this is Xillia 1's graphics over again. I like the new costumes they put all the characters in, but really this doesn't look any different from Xillia 1, which is not that a bad thing, because I thought Xillia 1 looked beautiful. Even in this modern era of PS4 graphics, I still think Xillia, these games look amazing. As for the soundtrack, a lot of reused music, same voice actors for all the voices, but a lot of reused stuff, a lot of reused assets. Like the towns are all the same for the most part. The music's all the same, so you might get a sense of deja vu or been there, done that with this game, especially with the missions, because this game has all of the locations of the first game, but you don't necessarily have to go to them. It's just there for side quest stuff. So on the one hand, the game feels pretty big, but then when you look at it sort of skeptically, from, you know, what the storyline is, where it's making you go, and things like that, a lot of the stuff is just extra. So whether or not that will bug you, I don't know. For me, I was fine with it because I could just quickly go to different areas that I had to get the stuff done, and then just never go back again. It's fine, you know. Focus on the storyline. But yeah, I mean, the music's still great. There are some new jazzy tracks, I think, that kind of go with the more noirish feel of this game, because you start off in Olympias, and since it's more of an urban area, it does have more of a sort of noirish feel at the beginning, especially with Luger's attire and being part of the Spurious Corporation. So the jazzy soundtrack, which I can't remember if it was in the first game or not, to be honest with you, really kind of feels that, or really kind of goes along with that new noirish feel. But anyway, yeah, Xillia 2, man, especially when you get to the end of the storyline, because it kind of does something that Tales has never really done before, which is actually make me feel sad. This is kind of a rough story in a lot of ways, and a lot of the storylines really kind of hit you in that feel spot, you know, especially when you get towards the end and you have to make some difficult choices, because that's kind of one of the weird things about this game. It's weird to have a Tales game with a silent protagonist, and Luger is a silent protagonist, but the reason is because you're constantly given choices about storyline aspects. You know, a character will ask you what your thoughts are, and you can completely change the course of the conversation with what you say back to them. You're given a choice between, you know, one extreme or the other, as is usual in most of these video games, but sometimes the correct choice or the better choice is not always easy to figure out. But I mean, everyone's story can be a little bit unique for you because of this. So in a lot of ways, the silent protagonist Luger, which, you know, a lot of people in this day and age kind of get a little pissy about, really kind of fits the game. Although it's weird when you go to the skits and Luger's there in the skit and doesn't say anything except, you know, it's kind of a weird thing. Especially when you're used to these very talky characters. To have a silent character in the game is a little bit weird. But overall, man, I loved Xillia 2. I loved seeing an RPG sequel that doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, can create a great storyline that keeps you intrigued, and continuously develop the characters you already love. It's great to see these characters continue and grow, and you know, aside from being a great game, that's just a great achievement, period, because a lot of times in these game sequels, the characters that you liked in the original game are just kind of window dressing, and they're not really growing like characters would in a film or like in a season 2 of a TV series. It's kind of really interesting to see, and I would like to see more of this in a lot of ways, you know. But it's hard in these RPGs because it's always like a world-threatening thing, and to have another world-threatening thing after a world-threatening thing. But it's kind of cool in a way because the events of the first game kind of lead to what happens in this game. So it's a nice, extension of what came before. But anyway, if you're kind of on the fence about this or you haven't thrown it in yet, definitely recommend it. You can't go wrong with a Tales game, at least as far as I have played. I haven't played Symphonia 2, which I hear is pretty bad, but as far as the Tales games I have played, I haven't come across a bad one yet. So one of my favorite series, definitely one of my favorite games in the series. Check it out. That is it for this game. Now I gotta go figure out what I'm going to do. If I'm going to start up Silent Hill Downpour or finish Hyrule Warriors. Probably work on Hyrule Warriors. But anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time.